And we also have Simone Cook, our state chair in Illinois. And we have with us today Kanaklee Edwards, the vice chair of AIM in Illinois. I'm not sure if Mike made it on, but Mike Nelson, a vice chair in Oklahoma. We also have our executive sponsor, Mr. Stephen Harris. Wave, Steve, if you're there. And Lil Sutton, our enterprise chairperson. Our presenters today is Danielle Cushing. Wave, Danielle. And also Melanie Hawkins. She will be helping with our question and answers. In this 1 hour virtual format, you can choose to cook along as you see some are in their kitchen. They're going to be cooking along. Or watch and learn as Danielle, prepares a recipe or teach a skill. So if you're at home, get comfortable in your kitchen, learn healthy cooking techniques, and understand how food impacts our long-term health and well-being. I would like to introduce you to Danielle, just a little bit about her. She is a FLEEC registered dietitian. She began her career with Compass Group in 2013 as a clinical hospital dietitian and transitioned into food service and wellness in 2016. She loves helping people meet their wellness goals one lunch at a time. Danielle can also be found in her home kitchen during her free hours. She runs a food and recipe blog that focuses on healthy meals and occasional indulgences. She also leads a busy and active life outside of the kitchen. Among other things, she runs along the Chicago lakefront and sailing on Lake Michigan. Please feel free to reach out to Danielle anytime you have questions about her wellness offerings or you need some nutritional related encouragement. I know I do a lot of times, so I'll be reaching out to Danielle. Or you'd like to recreate one of her fit recipes. And she will display her email later on. We also have with us Melanie Hawkins. She joined HCSC in April of 2019 as a clinical product manager for our well-being management suite of products. A fun fact about Melanie, she's also a registered dietitian with a business background. She enjoys engaging in holistic view of healthcare and particularly passionate about food, nutrition, and education as relates to health disparities in our community. So we'd like to welcome both of them, and please just stay on mute. If you have any questions, feel free to ask any questions in our chat. And we're ready to go, Danielle. It's in your hands.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gail, for the introduction. So welcome to today's Teaching Kitchen. This is the first one that we're doing in partnership with a diversity DRG. We're hoping to do one each quarter in 2021 and partner with a different DRG each time. So welcome to our first. I am going to kind of zip through a little introduction, and then we're going to have some more time to talk about some of the nutrition education while we've got some stuff on the stove. But just to give you a little bit about today's topic, February, of course, is Black History Month, and it is also Heart Health Month. So I can't think of a better time to talk about heart health for African Americans. And so AAIM helped me put together this program, and thank you very much. But one of the, just to kind of talk about some facts and why this is really important today. So some data from the CDC, young African Americans are living with diseases at a younger age that are more common found normally in an older age population. So African Americans ages 18 to 49 are 2 times more likely to die from heart disease than white Americans of the same age. I think we've seen, especially this year, we've seen a lot of talk about health disparities among different populations, and there's a wide variety of reasons. Some of them are non-modifiable, like genetics. Some of them are modifiable, but are going to take a lot of time and a lot of change, things like socioeconomic status, and then you know, access to health care and things like that. And then there are things that we can modify ourselves in our daily life, and one of those things is nutrition. So that's, of course, what we're going to focus on today. The positive news here is that we've seen from 1999 to present day, we have seen that the number of deaths due to heart disease in African-American population has actually dropped by 43% in the past 20 years. But that means that heart disease is still the number one cause of death. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We're making a plant-based meal. I had a couple people email me and say, can I use, ground beef or ground turkey or whatever? So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we'll talk about plant-based diets. We'll talk about the importance of paying attention to how much sodium you're eating. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so for those of you that are in your kitchen, I hope that you prepped all of your ingredients. I have mine prepped here. It really wasn't a lot. I had to cut my green peppers in half, and I have those kind of behind me, and I took out the seeds and chopped up an onion and then soaked some rice overnight. And then other than that, I just kind of opened some cans. So hopefully your prep was really minimal and really easy. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to get the Hoppin' John started. And you'll do 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You're going to need a pretty big pot. Mine is about 6 inches deep. It's pretty big and round. So go ahead and, if you will, measure out 2 tablespoons of olive oil and kind of drizzle it in the bottom. And we will put our pan over probably medium-high heat. Yep. Put your pot over medium heat. And then I just like to swirl my pan a little bit to make sure that the oil really coats all over the bottom. And then we'll toss in your diced onion. So mine, I had a huge onion. So hopefully you guys did too, but go ahead and toss in that diced onion. And then I'm going to toss in some garlic. I have mine in the freezer. So I did get some questions too beforehand about some convenience products. Cooking from scratch is so great, or preparing your meals at home, because you have so much control over what you're putting into your food, and that's so important. But I think it's realistic you're not always going to cook everything straight from scratch. I think convenience products really work well for me. So I do buy a lot of pre-cut veggies. It's a different, your time is also valuable. So if it's an extra 50 cents to buy a convenience product like a pre-cut veggie, it might be worth 50 cents for me to not have to spend 15 minutes in the kitchen chopping up my vegetables. So I am going to talk about and use some convenience products today. One of those things is garlic. I actually have a squeeze bottle. I should get that out too. I love garlic. Let's see. There we go. So you can use fresh garlic, which I have some in the fridge too. I also always keep a squeeze bottle of minced garlic, and I love these. These are frozen garlic cubes. You can usually find these in the freezer. But I'm going to go ahead, and 1 cube is equal to 1 clove. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop 2 of these in with my onion. All right, and give this a good stir. We're going to cook it. Make sure all of the onion and all of the garlic gets nicely coated in that olive oil. I can start to smell it a little bit. We're going to cook it until a little bit browned and aromatic. So definitely slow me down at any point for those that are cooking along with me if I'm going too fast. Mine is starting to smell aromatic. But next we're going to add the rice. So I did ask everybody to soak their rice overnight. Mine is still in water, so I won't tip this bowl because I'll spill it everywhere. But a couple of reasons you might soak your rice. rice can take like 45 minutes on the stove. If you soak it beforehand, you could shave off like 15 minutes because it's already absorbing some of that water overnight, which is really nice. Soaking or rinsing your rice before you cook it, it also helps the grains keep from like sticking together. So it'll give you a really nice like fluffy rice. So let's go ahead and drain this water off of the rice. My sink is behind me, so I'm going to step out of view while I drain this. All right. So we're going to add, this smells so good already. Who doesn't love the smell of garlic and onions? Okay, we're going to go ahead and add our rice, tomato paste, which I put my can back in the refrigerator, but my tomato paste came in a can in the aisle with the canned tomatoes. You could also get it in the refrigerated section in a tube, but you'll add 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, and then optional, you can add a little bit of cayenne pepper. I'm going to leave my cayenne out because I'm kind of a wimp, and I am going to add some jalapeno. I don't think I can handle those. All right, so go ahead and toss your rice in.
Danielle, are we just dumping the rice over into the pot with the tomato paste, onions, and garlic? Just dump it over in there?
Yep, dump it over in there, and then give it a quick stir. We're going to let this, before we add our broth, we're going to let the rice toast a little bit. So you'll start to smell it. It'll get kind of like a nutty aroma. All right. And I made this dish last week, actually. I wanted to test it out and make sure that it was delicious and that it was pretty easy and, you know, work out any kinks, make sure it made enough food. And I loved it. I thought it was so delicious. And I didn't add any of the seasonings that I wrote down as optional, and it still had a ton of flavor. Okay.
Danielle, a question.
Yeah.
Sometimes tomatoes require like salt to season them. And as we try to get away from that, is it okay to maybe add some salt-free Mrs. Dash? I have some garlic blend, some garlic herb Mrs. Dash that I thought might be nice for this. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So one of the things, feel free to add some. I love that Mrs. Dash has like 15 different flavors and they're all salt-free blends. So it's such a good option when we're taking a look at sodium in our diet. Just make sure you keep stirring every so often so the rice doesn't stick. One of the things I love about cooking is it's not an exact science. I'm going to swap in some different beans today, just as like an example. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you can play around with seasonings. I don't love cayenne, so I'm not going to put it in there. You could, if you really love garlic, you could double up on the garlic. So cooking is very flexible. And I think the more you do it, the more you cook, the more comfortable you become with making some of those adjustments. All right, so now I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to move mine off the heat for a minute. Now we're going to add our black-eyed peas. So just as an example, I did have somebody email me and say, I don't like black-eyed peas, can I use something else? Yes, so it's really easy to swap in like ingredients for like ingredients. So black-eyed peas are like very similar in texture to a bean. You could swap in pretty much any bean that you prefer. I suggested like a white bean just because they have a pretty mild flavor. And then, so as an example, I have a can of black-eyed peas. And I could not find, it's funny because when I made these last week, I could find black-eyed peas, no salt added. And then yesterday I could not. I went to one grocery store and they had no black-eyed peas whatsoever. And then the second one had black-eyed peas, but they have, I'll read here, in one serving, 280 milligrams of sodium. And so then I decided I didn't want to go to a third store. So then I bought butter beans, no salt added. So this had 280 milligrams per serving, and this one has 30 milligrams per serving of sodium. So I just wanted to get one of each to kind of illustrate that point to you about reading labels and really comparing the two. So before we add our beans, though, we'll go ahead and drain these. A lot of the sodium is in the brine that they come in, so we're going to drain them. We'll rinse them off before we add them, and then we're going to cook them in our own low-sodium broth. So go ahead and do that. Again, my kitchen is out of view of the camera, but I'll be right back. I need my colander. And I have never had a butter bean before. They're a lot bigger than what I pictured. I'll show you guys in a minute. Okay.
Danielle, you're missing out if you never had butter beans and cornbread. I'm sorry.
I haven't. They look like big lima beans. I mean, they do. They look like white lima beans. This is if anybody can see that.
Yeah, I think they are often interchangeable too, the lima beans and butter beans.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I like it. It's good flavor. Okay. So you guys will have to send me a recipe for butter beans and cornbread then. That's what it sounds like. Okay, so you've added your black-eyed peas or your beans. Go ahead and add your chicken broth as well, 3 cups, or vegetable broth. I always keep, I use chicken base. I always keep chicken base on hand. So instead of, and I'm not a vegetarian, I do eat a lot of plant-based foods. So if you are vegetarian or vegan, of course you want to use vegetable broth. But I went ahead and using chicken broth. I know my mom always keeps like bouillon cubes. So that's fine too, or you can buy a container broth. But
so Danielle,
chicken broth.
We could have done chicken broth.
You could,
I was
fussing
because I thought somebody was cheating who said they had chicken broth, and here I am with vegetable broth, trying to follow the rules.
And here,
You're talking about me, Danielle.
I was going to tell on you later, Gail. I wasn't going to do it in front of everybody. I'm sorry, Danielle. You said 2 cups or 3 cups? Of the vegetable broth. Okay.
Yeah. And then go ahead and pop your heat up to high. We're going to bring this to a boil. If you have a jalapeno, just to give it some flavor, I cut my jalapeno in half. The heat is in the seeds and the veining in the middle. So if you're a wimp, if you don't prefer heat, I am a wimp. You could take the seeds out and put the pepper in for just a little bit of flavor. I'm going to go ahead and keep my seeds in just for the sake of time. And I'm just going to add half. And it's going to kind of sit in there while it boils and cooks, and that flavor is it's going to give everything like a nice little spicy bite. So I'll drop that in there. And then if you have a bay leaf, they look like this. They're dry. They come they're in the spice aisle. Perfect. There you go. Melanie's got one. You can go ahead and drop a bay leaf in there. I did not use the bay leaf when I cooked it last time, and it was fine. But I'm curious to see what's different. And then this, we'll bring it to a boil, and then we will lower the heat and keep it at a simmer. And, well, we might keep it at like a little bit of a rolling boil so that it cooks a little faster. And it'll take about 20 minutes. We'll let a lot of that broth get soaked up by the rice and then also evaporate so it thickens up a little bit, because this is going to be our filling for our peppers. Okay. So while we're waiting for this to cook, we're going to also make our red pepper sauce. I'm going to move this to a different burner so I can still be in the front. And you guys can see me well. Okay, so that's part one. Pretty simple. We only diced up one onion, and most everything else was a convenience product that we chose, hopefully healthier selections that are lower in sodium. And so then just as fine a choice as if we use dry beans. I will say I love using dry beans, and starting with that, it does require soaking overnight, and then you have to cook them, so you have to simmer them on the stove, usually for an hour or two. So it was just that sort of, and I love it, the texture when you start with dried beans versus canned beans. It's like nuttier and almost like crunchier. You can tell the difference. So if you've never tried that, I do encourage trying it. But for our purposes today, I just wanted to make this really simple and not have you guys do so much prep in advance, and show you that, cooking can really be, cooking something like this is sort of is going to feel extravagant at the end, but it's not going to be too challenging. Okay, so let's go ahead and, mine is sort of boiling. So I'm going to turn the heat down to medium, and we're just going to keep this on the stove. You don't have to really pay attention to it too much, and you don't have to put a lid on it, because we're going to let some of that water evaporate out. Okay, so we're going to now make our red pepper sauce. So same thing as we did before. Go ahead and 2 tablespoons of oil into the bottom of your pot.
What kind of pot do we need for this one? I don't have the recipe up. I'm sorry.
I would do like a medium sauce pot. So something about this size.
Okay, I got that. And what are we putting in it?
You're going to put in a tablespoon of olive oil, and then 3 cloves of garlic. Man, we love garlic around here. Let me get my garlic. I think, so I adapted this recipe from a cookbook called Vegetable Kingdom. It's written by a chef. His name is Bryant Terry, but it's all plant-based, and a lot of it is traditional soul food or traditional Southern food, but made from, all plants. And I will say his original recipe had, y'all, I'm not exaggerating, I think it had like 10 cloves of garlic in the Hop and John, and then 8 cloves of garlic in the red pepper sauce. So if you love garlic, go for it. But I didn't even, when I tested the recipe last week, I didn't even do that. I was like, I don't know. I don't know if people will want to be around me after I eat that. Okay. All right, so pop 3 cloves of garlic in there. I'm making a mess now.
So right now we have the garlic and the olive oil.
Yep, and you're just going to saute the garlic as it browns. I'm making a huge mess. I gotta put my heat down.
Okay.
Okay. Mine already smells good, and it's already brown. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this. It smells like I'm in a restaurant. Okay. And then after that, if you have a jar of roasted red peppers, you're just going to pour in the whole thing, the juice and everything. One left, come out. need a. And roasted red peppers are, again, something that's really easy to make at home. This recipe in the cookbook actually walks you through roasting your own red peppers, which I love, and it is really easy, but again, it takes a little bit of time. So the jar of red peppers is it's actually pretty cost efficient because fresh red peppers in the store can be twice as expensive as green peppers. So actually buying them in a jar is sometimes more cost efficient, and you don't have to spend the time roasting them yourself. But if you do roast them yourself, you can, I think in the packet, I linked maybe to some instructions, or I talked about how you can freeze them and pull them out as needed for recipes that you're making.
Did we have to drain those?
Okay, so you do not have to drain those. We definitely want that liquid. Yeah. And then you're also going to add 1 can of whole peeled tomatoes, and you don't have to drain these either. Just add the entire can. Okay, I can turn my heat back up, I think. And we'll just cook these a little bit until they're hot. And everybody kind of check on your Hop and John. Maybe give it a stir. Make sure there's no rice sticking to the bottom. Mine seems to be doing great, but just in case. Okay, and while we give it a few minutes, I'll go ahead and talk about my first nutrition topic. So we'll talk a little bit about sodium. Obviously, I've had to talk about it a little bit as we've moved through this recipe. I get a lot of questions like, well, don't we need sodium? So we do. Sodium is it's an important mineral, but the American Heart Association recommends that we get about 1,500 milligrams per day. The USDA guidelines recommend about 2,400 milligrams per day. So if you want a good range, it's like a pretty big range, but if you're more of a range person, if you have a family history of high blood pressure, or if you are borderline high blood pressure, I would stick more to the 1,500. Otherwise, I would try to stay in that 1,500 to 2,400 range. Just for context, the average American gets 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day. So yes, sodium is important. We do need it in our bodies, but there's probably not a single one of us that are at risk for getting too little sodium. I'm just going to check on my food here. All right. Everything's still looking good. I just like to check in. So that being said, let's talk about how sodium affects your heart. So sodium attracts water. So if you have extra sodium in your blood, it means you also have extra water in your blood. And this is why sometimes if we eat sodium, a lot of salt the night before, like especially in Asian food and soy sauce, there's a ton of salt. And I know if I have something that, if I have like a stir fry and it's got a ton of soy sauce, the next day I'll wake up and I can actually feel it in my fingers. I feel a little puffy. So that's why we can feel like puffy or bloated. Sometimes people who are really sensitive might see swelling in their ankles. But that's because you have extra sodium in your blood, and sodium is attracted to water. So then you have more liquid now that's flowing through your blood vessels. And because you have more liquid that's flowing through, your blood pressure goes up. So that's kind of the mechanism behind, how sodium can affect your blood pressure. And then over time, if you continually have high blood pressure, that can overstretch or injure your blood vessels. And that added pressure will tire out your heart, because your heart is the organ that's pumping the blood through your blood vessels. So over time, your heart is under all this pressure and this strain and working harder than it needs to. And so that can lead to cardiovascular disease. And that's like the really shortened version. But that is the basics between the relationship between sodium or salt and how it affects your health. Okay, so before I love to talk, but let's check in on our food. It looks like, where's my, okay. My Hoppin' John is still looking good. And then my tomatoes and red peppers are boiling. I'm going to turn the heat down. We just really want it to simmer. I'm going to turn the heat down to about medium-low. And then we can go ahead and add lemon juice. I have a fresh lemon that I cut in half. If you are using a jar of lemon juice, totally fine. I think we're going to use 2 tablespoons. If you have a lemon, some people have like a fancy thing that, like a lemon juicer, I guess it's called. I don't, so I'm going to use a fork to help me with this lemon juice. I'll give it like a really good squeeze over my pan. And then you can just kind of use a fork to break up all the veins and all the flesh in that lemon, and it'll be really easy to squeeze more of that juice out. I love lemon juice. So my lemon that I bought is large, and I'm probably going to get more than 2 tablespoons. So again, cooking isn't an exact science. I know that I love lemons, so I'm going to add as much lemon juice as I can get out of this. And if you get some seed in here, we're going to blend this up in a blender or food processor, so you can blend that seed right in with it, and you won't notice. And then you can also add here a half teaspoon of ground cumin and a pinch of cayenne. And I might do a pinch of cayenne. I'm kind of thinking, what the heck? I'll just go for it. I got jalapeno in the Hoppin' John. I'll put some cayenne in here. Okay, I'm going to rinse my hands real fast. Can you guys see my little dog in the background? I don't know if you guys can see her in my video. Hold on. There she is. She's tiny.
Oh,
she just sits there. She just sits there and watches me. She's waiting for me to drop something.
That's what I was about to say. She's waiting for the scraps.
Oh, she is. Well, it's funny because my kitchen actually, I'm in the middle of renovating it. It's going to be done on Saturday, and I wanted it to be done by today so badly because I'm dying to use it. So I'm actually at my boyfriend's place. He's a lot messier than I am, and my dog, the first thing she does when she comes in, she'll spend 30 minutes in the kitchen, like just licking the floor everywhere. So she's had enough, I think, enough indulgences. I think she can hear me talking about her. She's got her ears sticking straight up. Okay, so this red pepper sauce, we're going to turn it down to a simmer. So I'm going to go further down to like low heat. And we're going to simmer it about 10 minutes while our Hoppin' John, hopefully your Hoppin' John is starting to get thicker. Mine is, definitely. The rice is not sticking to the bottom, which is good. So hopefully you guys are doing well too. So we'll continue to cook these. We'll do another check in about 5 minutes. But I can talk to you guys a little bit more about sodium and then about a plant-based diet, and then we'll finish up our meal.
Hey, Danielle.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions in the chat box. Can you talk a little bit more about, using dried beans or the flavorings that you could use in addition to salt with your beans?
Yeah. So I saw somebody type in the chat box actually that the addition of lemon is great because it's like a really bright and strong flavor. And so that can help you reduce the amount of salt in the recipe. I do love the line of Mrs. Dash products. I'll say that again. And they have like a lot of different blends. So I find that sometimes it's difficult to open the spice cabinet and say like, oh, I have like, let me see what's in here. I have chili powder, and I have paprika, and I have mustard seed. Like, what should do these go together, and do they go with what I'm making? So sometimes I find it a little easier just to buy some blends. A lot of them will be called like Italian seasoning or adobo seasoning, so you know like what kinds of foods to use them in. Another thing that I do a lot is I open them and smell them. I know this is really silly, and then I'll smell my food, and if they smell good together, I might add a little bit. And I'll usually start with like a small increment, maybe a quarter teaspoon, and then I'll taste, and then I'll adjust and add more if I need to. And actually, this chili powder smells like it would taste really well in this red pepper sauce. So that's kind of how I season and flavor food. Of course, garlic imparts a lot of flavor. I use garlic all the time. I use lemon all the time. So those are great choices because you don't always have to feel stuck to your spice cabinet. This would be really great if you had some fresh parsley, and at the end we chopped up some fresh parsley and put that on top as a garnish. So lots of fresh herbs you can use. Fresh herbs you'd use more towards the end of the cooking process. And then like woody herbs, so an example would be like rosemary or thyme. Those could cook a little bit because they're a little bit hardier. So if you're like baking something in the oven, you could go ahead and put that into the marinade, and that'll help kind of like extrapolate those flavors from like a really woody, hearty herb. But some of the like softer fresh herbs like basil and mint and parsley and cilantro are better added at the end. Did that answer the question? I hope so.
That was great. I think so. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. Let me talk a little bit more about the plant-based diet. So, what's wrong with meat is usually the first question. Well, there's nothing really wrong with meat per se, but it's the types of meat that you want to pay attention to. So, like red meat in particular is often loaded with cholesterol and saturated fat. If you can visibly see fat on there, that is probably a less desirable choice than a lean cut of meat. So pay attention to that when you're picking out your cut. Or on poultry, the skin is full of saturated fat and cholesterol as well. So even if it's like dark meat, I love chicken thighs and drumsticks. I love dark meat chicken. But I'll pull off the skin, and that will make it so much, it'll have more fat than like a chicken breast, but for me it's more flavorful than a white meat chicken breast, and so I'm more likely to eat it, right? So that kind of, it's not about like an all or nothing mentality. You can kind of find like a happy medium. And then also keep in mind things like processed meat, so deli meat, bacon, and sausage, they're usually loaded with sodium. So your fresh meats are better. And then fish and seafood can also be like a really good protein source. So plant-forward diets, I'm going to just give everything a little swirl. But plant-forward diet, oh yeah, I'm glad I am because my rice is starting to stick, which means this is almost done, I think.
Hey, Danielle.
Yeah.
This is Melanie. I just wanted, if I could real quick, mention to the participants that the recipe will be posted on our Yammer page after this event. Just to get people to register, we sent the recipe to the registrants only prior to, and then after the event is over, we'll go and post your entire participant package with the substitutes and everything on our Yammer page.
Yeah, thank you. I saw that there were a few questions coming in about that.
I had a question. You talked about, sorry. You talked about red meat and not seeing the fat, but I've always learned that you want to pick a cut of meat that has the caramelized look, to have the fat going through there because it's more flavorful. So you said it's actually bad for you?
That's the catch-22. That's the catch-22. what happens when that meat cooks is the fat melts. So if it's well marbled, that fat is going to melt all throughout, and it is going to make it really tender and juicy, but also with a lot of fat in it. So from a health perspective, what we'd prefer to do is choose meats that are less marbled and have less visible fat. So again, I'll go back to what I said before. I don't think it's an all or nothing mentality. If you're not going to be happy with like a filet mignon, a filet is a really, or like a sirloin is a really, is a pretty lean cut of meat. If you're not going to be happy with that, like there's some component to being like happy and satisfied with your food. So you don't necessarily have to go from like eating, T-bones and ribeyes to eating like a really lean sirloin. There's like a good happy medium in there, like a strip steak. That's just an example, but sort of like how I talked about chicken. I used to tell people like I just don't like chicken, and it was because I kept eating chicken breast, and I felt like it was like not very dry or not very like moist, not very flavorful. And as a side note, I have figured out recently how to cook the perfect chicken breast, and we are going to talk about that in the Teaching Kitchen on March 17th, I think, or 23rd. So tune in because I have figured it out. But prior to me figuring this out, I was like, I just really don't like chicken breast. I just don't like chicken. I'm never going to eat it. And then I discovered, I actually really love like chicken thighs. Well, I don't have to, I'd rather be satisfied and be happy with my meal. So rather than like force myself to eat something that I'm not enjoying, I think, okay, well, chicken thigh and chicken drumstick, if I take the skin off, that's like a lot better for me, even though it's still that dark meat chicken that has a higher fat content. So I think it's sort of about like meeting in the middle when it comes to your health and not having like an all or nothing mentality. It's about making small changes that over time have a really big impact, if that makes sense. Okay. All right, so with that being said, I do want to get back to plant-based diets. We have 10 minutes left. We are almost done. Let's go ahead and finish up our food first, and then I'll have a few bullet points about plant-based eating, and I'll let you guys know how to add in some ground turkey or ground beef if you prefer, and what types to look for. But let's go ahead and finish this up. So we're gonna, to finish our sauce, we're gonna transfer that. If you have an immersion blender or stick blender, I don't have one. You could just stick it right in this pot and blend it all up. They're very convenient. I have this NutriBullet. If you could also, so you could do this in any type of blender. If you have like a small smoothie blender, you might have to do it in a couple of batches. And then you could also do it in a food processor. So let me make sure. I have definitely made the mistake before where not everything was tight, and I had sauce coming out everywhere, and I'm wearing white, so I don't want to do that. Okay, I haven't used this blender in so long. Make sure it's in there. Okay, good. So I'm just going to pour my sauce in here. This is making me nervous. Ooh. Okay. I can't get this in and out. I just need it to be lower to the ground. Okay, so you can transfer everything from that pot into your blender, and then it should take maybe 5 or 10 seconds to blend it all up, put my lid on, in case I hit the button again by accident. I haven't used this in so long, and I feel like it's really sticky. I must not have done a good job last time I cleaned it. Okay. Nope. Okay. Here we go. All right, and looks pretty good and blended. I'm going to grab my peppers. Mine did not all fit in one casserole dish, so I have this pie pan. You can use anything that's oven safe and has a lip on it, because we're going to put the sauce in the bottom of this pan. So I have a casserole dish and a pie pan. And then I'm going to put about 2/3 of the sauce in the bottom of this pan underneath my peppers. And then I'm going to put about 1/3 in the pie pan underneath my peppers. This being in the bottom of the pan is going to keep the peppers from drying out when we put them in the oven, which I'll give everybody instructions for. We're not going to do it on camera. You guys can, we'll cover our dishes in foil, and then you guys will have dinner ready to go tonight. You can just pop it in the oven. And then we will fill each of these peppers with our Hoppin' John. And make sure if you put a bay leaf in here, you can kind of fish the bay leaf out. I'm going to fish out my jalapeno. And then I'll just fill these 3 peppers, and I'll show you guys what they look like. And while y'all continue to fill your peppers, I will finish talking about plant-based diets, and then if there are any questions, we can get to that. So this is what they look like. Let me see if I can see myself. Okay. So they look really, oh, I almost spilled that on my computer. But that's about what they should look like. You can fill them all evenly. They should all be pretty full. This, when I made this last week, everything got like a heaping spoonful. And then once they cook and you serve them, it's, 2 peppers per serving. So it's a good amount of food. And then there's all that sauce in the bottom of the pan. So just scoop up some of that sauce and drizzle it over your peppers. And I think this is something that the whole family is going to enjoy. Okay, so I have 5 minutes left. So I'll, real quickly, while you guys are finishing up, I'll talk about some plant-based diets and then any questions. So I also want to, okay, so we've already talked about, meat isn't necessarily the enemy, but there are better choices than others. And of course, the best thing that we can do, plant-based foods don't have saturated fat and they don't have cholesterol. So plant-based proteins are undoubtedly really good for us. And if we're talking about sustainability, which is a topic for a whole other day, but I will say too, the carbon footprint of plant-based foods versus animal-based proteins, it's so much better for the environment as well. So there's a spectrum, right? So you could be somebody, I feel like I'm a little bit like plant-forward, and that just means that when I have meals, plants are at the center of my plate. Instead of making my animal protein the star of the show, I'll make the main dish a vegetarian, and then maybe there might be some animal protein like in a side dish or something like that. So that's more like plant forward. It's animal proteins are there, but they're just not incorporated as the star of your diet. A flexitarian diet, I might fall into this category too, but this is somebody that mostly sticks to plant-based foods, but sometimes indulges in meat or fish. I love a good Shake Shack burger. I eat salmon probably like 3 days a week. But other than that, I'm like, I do eat a lot of vegetarian protein. So I'm kind of in that flexitarian area. And then, of course, there's a vegetarian, somebody that sticks to plant-based foods, but does include dairy and eggs. And then, of course, at the other end of the spectrum, there's a vegan. There's somebody who excludes all animal products. So I think I just want to, some of my like high points about vegetarian and plant-based diets is that a recent study showed that, because a lot of people decide, oh, I'm going to be vegetarian because it'll be healthy for me, but then they eat a lot of processed foods like white pasta and with or like a ton of rice and a ton of pasta and like processed sauces and things like that. So I do want to say a recent study showed that vegetarians eating high quality plant foods like beans and legumes and whole grains was associated with a lower risk of death from cardiovascular disease than people who are also vegetarian, but eating lower quality plant foods like refined grains and white potatoes and French fries and desserts. So keep that in mind. The quality of your food is important. And then another recent study also showed that even if you've eaten a poor diet for half of your life, adding more healthy plant foods as an adult can still help you reduce your cardiovascular disease risk. So don't ever feel like, oh, I've been eating this way for 40 years, like it's too late to make a change. It's not. It's never too late. And then when it comes to plant-based in particular, you know, I've said this once or twice already, I'll say it 1,000 times, start where you are. There's no need to have an all or nothing mentality. There's no reason to say, oh, I need to, like, I can never eat meat again, or I should be vegetarian. Try starting with 1 day a week. A lot of people say, I'm going to do meatless Monday. Aim to eat plant-based 1 day a week. And then after you get used to it and you're enjoying it and you found like your comfort zone and your rhythm with vegetarian foods, maybe then you say, okay, I'm going to do 2 days a week. I'm going to eat plant-based. Even that does make a difference. So I don't ever want anybody to feel like it's too late to make a change or their change isn't big enough. It's about making small goals and making small changes that add up over time. The last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get really close to the camera, is in the chat box, Flick put on this podcast. It's actually on YouTube, so it's kind of like a video. The links didn't share in there. But it's called, let me see if I can get the link. It's called
I can share it. Danielle.
I just pulled it up.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, Melanie. I forgot you were there. I'm like just in my own world over here. But it's called Food is Medicine, a conversation on Black wellness. So we have this council, this diversity council, and it's made up of a few different chefs. And this also, if you live in Chicago, we have a guest on here. Her name's LaShawn. But she is really involved in urban agriculture and access to food. And I'm actually talking with her next week to see how I can get involved because her mission is really cool. But I think it's a really interesting podcast that talks about food as medicine and how we can like make changes to our cultural diet. But so, you know, if you have some free time, take a listen.
Hey, Danielle, one more thing. We'd like to ask all of you all, panelists included, to take pictures tonight once you finish with your meal. Make sure that you post, or in the morning, post on Yammer to share with us what it looked like, your happy plates that the family finished with after they ate all the food. We want to see it on the Yammer page, so don't forget.
Yeah. All right. But thank you.
I love it. I won't forget. I'll put it on Yammer.
And I'll also place the recorded session on Yammer for those of you who need to go back and see something that maybe Danielle had said. We'll post the recorded session on Yammer as well. So Yammer is the place to go and find out what's happening or what's after with AIM.
Right. Thank you so much, Danielle and Melanie, for joining us on our first event for Black History Month. Mine smells good. I don't know how it tastes. It smells good. But anyway, we really appreciate it. I certainly will be reaching out to you for some encouragement for my nutritional journey, the healthy nutrition journey.
Definitely, please.
All right. And everybody that's online, stay tuned for next week for our next event. What is that going to be, Melanie?
We're going to do our career vision next week in partnership with Women in Finance and WISE. And don't forget, we're filling the pantry. So every Friday, log into our Yammer page, click the link, and make a donation to your local food pantry. Or 1 week, maybe you'll do Oklahoma or Texas instead of Illinois. But by the end of February, we want to fill our pantries and help the individuals out there who are having a hard time during this pandemic. So we want to thank Danielle, thank you, Melanie, thank all the participants. Don't forget to take pictures, and we'll see you filling the pantries Friday and next week on Tuesday at our next event. Thank you, Gail, Simone, Bill, Stefan, everybody.
Stefan. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Well, Melanie, I think it went okay.
I know, right? Look, I was trying.